Good day, everyone. I'd like to welcome you back to Virtue and Vice. A little hesitant today to share what I would like to share with you about my sister Marge. I've always had an affinity for Marge. She's passed away now, and I miss her. But I remember growing up when we were quite young, she had a fallout with my parents and she was going to run away. And I told her, I'll run away with you. I was young. I was 4 years younger than her, and but she was going to run away. She didn't end up running away, but my sister Marge had a rough time. Uh, I want to talk to you, share with you just a little bit about some of the difficulty Marge had in her life. Marge got married fairly young, and she had a romance with someone and had some children that came as a result of that romance, two children, a great niece and nephew, Heath and Heidi. But Marge was an alcoholic, and she wasn't the kind of alcoholic that you drink a little bit too much every day, and you get up and go to the work the next day. Uh, no, Marge was you keep drinking till you hit the wall kind of alcoholic. She started to drink, she just kept drinking until something drastic happened. She either ended up passed out somewhere or in the hospital or in jail, but she would not quit until she hit the wall. One of those types of alcoholics. Um, but I was a teenager at this time, living at home when she was going through the worst of it. And I can remember in the middle of the night getting a call, my parents getting a call from a neighbor saying that her two young kids were not being watched because she was passed out somewhere. And then going, retrieving them, and talking with her, and bringing the kids back to my parents' house. My parents eventually ended up raising the two children. And she committed in her ways of alcoholism, hitting the wall again and again. I can remember visiting Marge in rehab. I can remember visiting her at the house many a times when she was sometimes sober, sometimes on her way to hitting the wall again, and sometimes when she hit the wall, having many conversations. I can remember one of the things that I believe, one of the pains that she had in her soul concerned this search for love and acceptance she was trying to get from my dad, particularly my parents. We were raised in a strict German home, and one of the things, of course, that many German homes were like, German parents loved their children, but many of them didn't express that emotionally, physically very much. And Marge, she felt that very deeply. One time in rehab when we were there, and I was there too, trying to be a help. She looked at my dad and said, "Well, you never told me that you loved me." She was looking for her sense of worth from my parents, from my dad in particular, but didn't get that, in the way that she felt like she needed it. And it was a pain she carried. But the more I dealt with Marge, again, going to times when she was self destructing in her alcoholism, her drug of choice, or her alcohol of choice, I should say, was vodka. She would hit vodka heavily again until she hit the wall. It was a way, I think, maybe to try to self destruct. She had voices in her mind that told her that she's no good in many ways. I can remember many times talking with Marge, but one in particular that I began to get more of an insight into the pain that she was carrying. It was one time when she was on her way to hit the wall again through vodka, but she wasn't there yet. She was still lucid in her mind, and I was there at that time. This was after her children were basically in the custody of my parents, but she was on her way again. And I was with her at this time, and she was bent on committing suicide at this time. I believe she was going to do it. What she had available to her at that time were pills, and she had the pills ready. Lots of pills she was going to take. Because she had these voices in her mind telling her she's no good. And there was a voice deeper in her soul that I had never heard before during this time. It came out of um, a place of real darkness. And she went back into an experience that she had, um, and I believe it happened when an uncle had molested her when she was younger. Marge was a good looking girl. She was beautiful in many ways. She was a beautiful young lady. She was model, that type of good looking. And an uncle, I believe, did something to her because in this place in her soul, she lived it again. And she was crying out, "Don't hurt me! Don't hurt me!" And uh, I believe he penetrated her, and she was reliving it. And God knows how many times she relived that time. Again, telling her she's no good. You're good for nothing to be used. And I was praying at that time, Lord, how can I mean I didn't know what to do. How can I say something that will make a difference here at this spot? I was a brother trying to help, didn't know what to do, didn't know what to say. But in that time of deep darkness, in that time of bearing her soul, the only thing I really knew to say to Marge is, Marge, God loves you right here. He knows. He knows that pain. He knows what you're feeling. He feels it. The evil is something that he experienced. Something happened at that time, and I would like to say that everything was just hunky dory. Everything turned out great after that. But what I can say is that I think God touched her soul. She didn't commit suicide. I think she began to believe that God indeed loved her, even in the midst of that kind of pain. One of the reasons that I react so strongly against those perhaps who have rejected the love of God is that I've experienced it. I've experienced it in the depravity of my own soul. I experienced it in the pain of my sister. I experienced it on the deathbed of my brother. I've experienced it in the lives of people, and God's grace and His love is greater than all of our sin and all the evil that the world can perpetuate. But when I hear people who have been touched by that love and yet spurn it, it hurts. But I realize too that it hurts God more than it hurts me. He's the one that's being rejected. It reminds me of Ezekiel chapter 16. In this passage, God speaks to the nation of Israel, and he speaks of the time that he found them. And he speaks of them as a discarded baby who is wallowing in its own blood, and no one cleaned it up, but that baby was born and just discarded. And Ezekiel says in chapter 16, no eye looked on you with pity or compassion to do any of these things for you. Rather, the day you were born, you were left out in the field, rejected. But God, He did something. He was moved with compassion. Then I passed by and saw you struggling in your blood. And I said to you, in your blood, live. God gave life. God gave life to this nation of Israel. And the chapter goes on and it talks about that Israel grew up and God betrothed her. God brought her into covenant with him, and they had this relationship, this intimate relationship. But it goes on and says that she spurned God. She became a prostitute. She went after other gods. But the end of the chapter also says, God will reestablish my covenant with you, that you may know that I am the Lord. That speaks of the audacious love of God that doesn't give up on us. If you deconstructed from this God, you may have chucked it all, but his love is audacious. He won't let you go. He'll keep pursuing you. He'll keep reminding you of his love over and over and over again. That's how much he loves you. God touched Marge in the depth of her soul. He touches us in the depth of our depravity. We don't even know how wretched we are, but it doesn't matter because God loves us there in the deepest part of our depravity. When we hit the bottom, we feel like there's nothing else. God's mercy is greater than all of our sin. That word, Hebrew word for mercy, chesed, it's all over the place in the Old Testament. In the Psalms, it's used some 80 sometimes, but all over the place, chesed, mercy. And then you come to the New Testament, it's mercy. God is mercy. What a great love he loves us with. It's an audacious love. You see, that is really the basis of any kind of dignity and self-worth we can have. You see, that love goes beyond. Many people say, well, you can find your self-worth by looking in yourself. You can reject God and you get self-worth from yourself. In fact, it was that great philosopher Beyonce. She said, you yourself, you determine your own self-worth. You don't have to depend on someone else to tell you who you are. That's from Saint Beyonce. Well, and there may be one element of truth to that. But I've believed and I've seen God love people who couldn't have any self-worth anymore. They couldn't tell themselves that they're significant. They didn't have any reasons to say, I'm worth something, because they lost it all. I think of a mother-in-law who lived with us